There are moments in life when the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Many people believe strength is found in having the perfect comeback, winning every argument, or proving every accusation wrong. They spend countless hours defending themselves, explaining their intentions, and trying to convince someone who has already decided not to understand them. But there comes a point when wisdom asks a different question. What is this constant battle costing you? Not every conflict deserves your voice. Not every accusation deserves your defense. Not every misunderstanding deserves your attention. Some people are not searching for truth. They are searching for control. They thrive on emotional reactions because every reaction keeps you engaged in a cycle that steals your peace, your confidence, and your purpose. The more you try to justify yourself, the more trapped you become in conversations that were never designed to bring understanding. This is where silence becomes one of the greatest expressions of strength. Not the silence of bitterness, not the silence of revenge, but the silence of wisdom. The silence that refuses to surrender emotional control. The silence that protects your dignity. The silence that allows truth to speak through your character instead of endless arguments. Silence is not about making someone else suffer. It is about refusing to let unnecessary conflict govern your life. It is choosing self-control over impulse, discernment over drama, and purpose over distraction. Today you will discover why silence is far more than simply saying fewer words. You will learn how emotional discipline breaks unhealthy patterns, why peace is more powerful than endless debate, and how guarding your attention can transform your relationships and your future. Because the strongest person is not the one who always has the last word. The strongest person is the one who knows when words are no longer necessary, when peace is worth protecting, and when walking forward with quiet confidence is far more powerful than winning another argument. Let's begin. One of the greatest misconceptions about silence is that it represents weakness. Many people assume that if someone chooses not to argue, not to defend themselves, or not to respond to every insult, it must mean they are afraid, defeated, or incapable of standing up for themselves. But true wisdom teaches the exact opposite. There is a silence that comes from fear, but there is also a silence that comes from strength. One is the silence of intimidation. The other is the silence of mastery. Learning the difference can completely change the direction of your life. Consider how many people spend their days reacting instead of living. Every criticism demands a response. Every misunderstanding requires an explanation. Every negative comment becomes an invitation to debate. They wake up intending to build their future, but by the end of the day, they have invested most of their emotional energy defending themselves against people who were never interested in understanding them. Without realizing it, they have allowed someone else's behavior to determine the quality of their own life. Emotional mastery begins the moment you realize that not every invitation deserves your acceptance. If someone invites you into an unnecessary argument, you have the freedom to decline. If someone attempts to provoke anger, you have the ability to remain calm. If someone misrepresents your intentions, you do not always need to convince them otherwise. There is remarkable strength in choosing your responses instead of allowing your emotions to choose for you. Many manipulative individuals depend on emotional reactions. They understand that if they can make you angry, defensive, or desperate to prove yourself, they have already gained influence over your thoughts. The conversation stops being about truth and becomes about emotional control. They provoke because they know that a reactive person is easier to distract from their purpose. This is why emotional discipline is one of the greatest forms of personal freedom. When your emotions serve your wisdom instead of controlling it, other people's attempts to manipulate you lose much of their power. Silence, when guided by wisdom, is not avoidance, it is discernment. Avoidance comes from fear of facing reality, Wise silence comes from recognizing that some conversations have no destination. You can spend hours explaining yourself to someone who has already decided not to listen. You can provide evidence, speak with kindness, and present the truth with clarity, yet nothing changes because understanding was never their objective. They were not seeking answers. They were seeking another opportunity to keep you emotionally engaged. Think about a person who throws stones into a calm lake. Every stone creates ripples that spread across the water. Now imagine refusing to throw the stone at all. The water remains still. The peace remains undisturbed. Your mind works in much the same way. Every unnecessary argument creates emotional ripples that affect your thoughts, your concentration, your decisions, and even your relationships with people who had nothing to do with the original conflict. Choosing silence in situations that do not deserve your energy protects the calmness of your inner life. This does not mean you never speak. There are moments when truth must be spoken with courage. There are times when injustice must be confronted, healthy boundaries must be established, and wisdom requires clear communication. Silence is not about becoming passive or refusing to address important issues. It is about knowing the difference between meaningful conversations that can produce growth and pointless conflicts that only produce exhaustion. Wisdom recognizes that these are not the same thing. One of the greatest signs of maturity is learning that your value is not determined by whether everyone agrees with you. Many people exhaust themselves trying to correct every false assumption made about them. They believe they must defend their reputation at every opportunity. But if your confidence depends upon universal approval, you will spend your entire life chasing something you can never achieve. There will always be people who misunderstand your motives, question your decisions, or criticize your character. If you attempt to answer every accusation, you will eventually neglect the purpose you were created to fulfill. Real confidence allows you to remain steady even when others choose misunderstanding. It understands that character is built over time through consistent actions, not through endless explanations. A tree does not argue about whether it is healthy. It simply continues producing fruit. In the same way, a life of integrity speaks more powerfully than constant self-defense. People may question your words for a moment, but they cannot ignore consistent character forever. Silence also protects your emotional energy. Every human being has limited mental and emotional resources each day. Where those resources are invested determines the quality of your future. If most of your energy is consumed by defending yourself against negativity, you will have little strength remaining to pursue your dreams, develop your gifts, strengthen healthy relationships, or serve others with excellence. Your attention is too valuable to be surrendered to every distraction that crosses your path. There is another remarkable benefit to wise silence. It gives you time to think. Strong emotions often demand immediate action, but wisdom invites careful reflection. When you pause before speaking, you create space for discernment. You ask better questions. You consider long-term consequences instead of temporary satisfaction. Many regrets are born in moments when people spoke before they reflected. Many victories are preserved because someone chose patience instead of impulse. Silence is also an act of self-respect. It communicates that your peace is too valuable to be traded for unnecessary drama. It reminds you that not every opinion deserves equal influence over your emotions. Just because someone speaks loudly does not mean they speak wisely. Just because someone criticizes you does not mean they understand you. You have the responsibility to decide whose voices deserve access to your heart and whose opinions should simply pass by without disturbing your confidence. As you grow in emotional maturity, you will notice something extraordinary. You become less interested in winning arguments and more interested in protecting your purpose. You stop measuring success by having the final word and begin measuring it by maintaining your peace. You no longer allow every criticism to interrupt your progress because your focus has shifted from pleasing people to fulfilling your calling. This quiet confidence cannot be manufactured overnight. It is developed through daily discipline, consistent wisdom, and the decision to let your character speak louder than your reactions. Never mistake wise silence for surrender. Sometimes the strongest statement you can make is refusing to participate in a battle that offers no reward except exhaustion. Sometimes the greatest victory is walking away with your integrity intact while others remain trapped in endless conflict. Your silence, when guided by wisdom, is not evidence that you have lost your voice. It is evidence that you have gained something far more valuable, the ability to govern yourself. And a person who has learned to master their own emotions is far more powerful than someone who spends their life trying to control everyone else. Many people believe that controlling others requires physical strength, loud words, or obvious intimidation. But some of the most effective forms of control are far more subtle. They are built upon emotional dependence. A person who constantly seeks attention, admiration, or emotional reactions from others often discovers that keeping people emotionally engaged gives them a sense of influence. This is why understanding the role of emotional reactions is so important. The moment you recognize what fuels unhealthy patterns, you begin to understand how to remove yourself from them with wisdom and dignity. Every relationship functions through some form of exchange. Healthy relationships exchange trust, encouragement, honesty, respect, and mutual support. Each person contributes to the well-being of the other, but unhealthy relationships often operate differently. Instead of mutual respect, they depend upon emotional imbalance. One person continually gives while the other continually takes. One person apologizes while the other rarely accepts responsibility. One person sacrifices peace while the other becomes increasingly comfortable, demanding more. Over time, this imbalance becomes the normal pattern of the relationship. One of the ways manipulative individuals maintain this imbalance is by constantly seeking emotional responses. They may provoke arguments over small issues, criticize unnecessarily, create confusion, or repeatedly revisit conflicts that should have already been resolved. The objective is not always to solve a problem. Often the objective is simply to keep your attention focused on them. Every explanation, every defensive response, every emotional outburst keeps the cycle alive. Without realizing it, you become emotionally occupied by someone else's behavior instead of investing your energy in your own growth. Think about how much mental space one difficult relationship can occupy. You replay conversations while driving. You imagine future arguments before going to sleep. You analyze text messages repeatedly, searching for hidden meanings. You rehearse explanations that you may never even speak. While your body is present at work, with your family, or pursuing your goals, your mind remains trapped in emotional conflict. This is one of the greatest costs of manipulation. It steals not only your peace, but also your focus. Attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Whatever consistently occupies your attention gradually shapes your life. If your attention is constantly directed toward conflict, confusion, and emotional drama, those things begin to dominate your thinking. Your creativity decreases. Your joy becomes harder to access. Your confidence weakens because your emotional energy is being consumed by battles that produce no lasting benefit. This is why wise silence can become so powerful. It interrupts the unhealthy cycle. Instead of responding to every attempt to provoke you, you begin choosing where your attention belongs. You recognize that not every criticism deserves an answer. Not every accusation deserves an explanation. Not every disagreement deserves a prolonged discussion. You stop feeding endless conflict with endless participation. This does not mean ignoring important issues or refusing healthy communication. Healthy relationships require honest conversations, accountability, and mutual understanding. But there is a significant difference between resolving genuine problems and becoming trapped in repetitive emotional cycles where the same issues continue without any desire for meaningful change. Wisdom helps you recognize this difference. One of the reasons emotional reactions are so effective is because they often bypass careful thinking. Strong emotions naturally demand immediate action. Anger wants instant responses. Fear wants immediate protection. Guilt urges quick apologies. But wisdom teaches patience. It reminds you that your first emotional impulse is not always your wisest decision. The ability to pause before responding is one of the greatest signs of emotional maturity. When you stop reacting impulsively, something remarkable begins to happen. You start observing patterns that were previously hidden by constant emotional activity. You notice that certain conversations always end the same way. You recognize recurring behaviors that never truly change. You see promises repeated without consistent action. Instead of becoming lost inside each individual conflict, you begin seeing the larger picture. Clarity replaces confusion because you are no longer consumed by the emotion of the moment. There's another important lesson here. Many people confuse attention with love. They believe that because someone constantly demands their emotional energy, it must mean the relationship is deeply important. But constant emotional intensity is not always evidence of genuine connection. Healthy relationships often produce stability rather than continual crisis. They create peace instead of constant anxiety. They encourage growth instead of emotional exhaustion. When you refuse to participate in unnecessary emotional battles, you reclaim something incredibly valuable: your freedom to focus on your own life. You begin investing more energy into your family, your purpose, your education, your health, your faith, your career, and your personal growth. Instead of waking each day wondering how to manage someone else's unpredictable behavior, you begin asking yourself how you can become wiser, stronger, and more disciplined. This shift transforms every area of life. Your decisions become calmer because they are no longer driven by emotional pressure. Your confidence grows because your self-worth is no longer measured by another person's reactions. Your relationships improve because you begin surrounding yourself with people who value mutual respect instead of emotional control. Most importantly, your peace returns because you have stopped giving unlimited access to those who consistently disturb it. Remember that emotional discipline is not about becoming distant or uncaring. It is about becoming intentional. You choose where your heart is invested. You choose which conversations deserve your attention. You choose whether your energy will be consumed by endless conflict or directed toward lasting purpose. Every one of these choices shapes the person you become. Never underestimate the power of withdrawing your unnecessary emotional involvement from unhealthy patterns. The moment you stop feeding constant drama with constant reactions, you begin strengthening your own emotional independence. You discover that your peace does not depend upon someone else's approval. Your confidence no longer rises and falls with another person's mood. Your purpose becomes greater than their attempts to distract you. In that moment, you experience one of life's greatest freedoms. Not the power to control someone else, but the wisdom to govern yourself. And a person who has mastered themselves is far more difficult to manipulate than someone who spends every day reacting to the emotions of others. There are moments in life when stepping back is not an act of giving up. It is an act of gaining perspective. Many people believe that every problem must be solved immediately. Every accusation must be answered, and every disagreement must be settled before the day ends. They fear that if they do not respond right away, they will lose control of the situation. Yet some of the greatest mistakes people make are born in moments when emotions are louder than wisdom. When your heart is racing and your mind is clouded by frustration, disappointment, or anger, your ability to see clearly becomes limited. This is why silence can become one of the greatest gifts you give yourself. It creates space for clarity to replace confusion. Imagine looking into a glass of water after someone has stirred it vigorously. The water becomes cloudy, and it is difficult to see what is beneath the surface. But if you simply leave the glass untouched for a while, the movement stops, the particles settle, and the water becomes clear again. The same principle applies to the human mind. When your emotions are constantly stirred by arguments, criticism, manipulation, or unnecessary drama, your thinking becomes cloudy. You struggle to distinguish facts from feelings, truth from distortion, and wisdom from impulse. Silence allows the emotional dust to settle so that you can finally see reality as it truly is. Many people become trapped in cycles of emotional conflict because they mistake activity for progress. They believe that if they keep talking, explaining, arguing, or defending themselves, eventually the situation will improve. But not every conversation leads to understanding. Sometimes endless discussion only deepens confusion because the other person is not searching for truth, they are searching for control, attention, or another opportunity to provoke an emotional response. In those moments, continuing the conversation does not create clarity, it creates exhaustion. One of the greatest benefits of silence is that it removes you from the emotional intensity of the moment. When you are no longer reacting immediately, you begin asking better questions. Instead of asking, how do I prove them wrong? You begin asking, is this conversation even leading anywhere? Instead of wondering, what can I say to make them understand? You begin asking, are they genuinely interested in understanding? Those questions shift your focus from emotional survival to wise discernment. They help you evaluate the relationship instead of becoming consumed by the latest argument. Clarity also allows you to recognize patterns that emotions often hide. During emotional conflict, every disagreement feels like an isolated incident. But when you step back, you begin noticing repetition. You realize that the same conversations happen over and over again. The same promises are made without lasting change. The same behaviors continue despite countless apologies. What once appeared to be random events now reveal themselves as consistent patterns. This realization is powerful because wisdom is built on recognizing patterns, not merely reacting to moments. Another important lesson silence teaches is the difference between facts and assumptions. When emotions are high, the mind often fills empty spaces with fear. You begin imagining motives that may not exist. You predict outcomes that have not happened. You create conversations in your mind before they ever take place. Anxiety grows because your thoughts become centered on possibilities instead of realities. Silence interrupts this process. It slows your thinking and encourages you to deal with what is true rather than what is merely imagined. There is tremendous strength in learning to observe before reacting. Great leaders, wise mentors, and emotionally mature individuals rarely make major decisions in moments of emotional chaos. They pause, they reflect, they gather understanding before taking action. This does not mean they avoid difficult decisions. It means they refuse to let temporary emotions make permanent choices for them. That discipline protects them from many unnecessary regrets. Silence also strengthens your ability to listen, not only to others, but to yourself. Many people become so occupied by constant conflict that they lose touch with their own inner convictions. Every day is filled with someone else's opinions, demands, criticisms, or expectations. Eventually, they no longer recognize their own voice beneath all the noise. But when you create intentional moments of quiet, you begin reconnecting with your values. You remember what truly matters. You rediscover the dreams that conflict caused you to neglect. You begin hearing wisdom that was impossible to recognize while your attention was consumed by endless distraction. One of the greatest gifts clarity provides is the ability to distinguish between what you can control and what you cannot. You cannot force another person to become honest. You cannot compel someone to value your kindness. You cannot make another individual accept responsibility for choices they refuse to acknowledge. But you can control your responses. You can guard your peace. You can choose your priorities. You can invest your time in becoming stronger rather than remaining trapped in someone else's unhealthy behavior. This realization brings incredible freedom because it redirects your energy toward areas where real growth is possible. Clarity also transforms your relationships. Instead of judging people solely by their words, you begin evaluating them by consistent actions. Instead of becoming impressed by temporary promises, you begin looking for lasting character. Instead of making decisions based on emotional pressure, you begin making them according to wisdom and principle. This shift protects your heart because it allows reality, not wishful thinking, to guide your choices. Perhaps one of the most beautiful aspects of silence is that it reminds you your life is too valuable to be governed by constant emotional turmoil. Every moment spent trapped in unnecessary conflict is a moment that cannot be invested in your purpose. Every hour consumed by confusion is an hour unavailable for growth, creativity, service, learning, and meaningful relationships. When clarity returns, so does your focus. When focus returns, progress becomes possible again. Never underestimate the transforming power of stepping back long enough to think clearly. Silence is not empty. It is often where wisdom begins to speak. It is the place where emotional storms lose their strength, where confusion gives way to understanding, and where truth becomes easier to recognize. As your mind grows quieter, your judgment becomes stronger. As your emotions become calmer, your decisions become wiser. And as your clarity increases, you discover that many battles you once believed were necessary were never worth fighting at all. That is the quiet strength of emotional maturity, the ability to pause, to discern, and to move forward guided not by the noise of the moment, but by the enduring wisdom that leads to lasting peace. One of the greatest mistakes people make when dealing with manipulative individuals is believing they must explain every decision they make. They feel obligated to justify every boundary, defend every choice, answer every accusation, and provide lengthy reasons for protecting their own peace. They hope that if they simply explain themselves clearly enough, the other person will finally understand. While this approach may work in healthy relationships where both people genuinely seek mutual understanding, it often becomes ineffective in relationships where one person is committed to maintaining control rather than pursuing truth. There is an important principle every emotionally mature person must learn. Not everyone who asks for an explanation is searching for understanding. Some people ask questions only to challenge your answers. They request explanations not because they are confused, but because they want another opportunity to argue. They continue asking why, not to gain clarity, but to wear down your confidence until you begin questioning your own decisions. If you do not recognize this pattern, you may spend countless hours defending choices that never required anyone else's approval in the first place. Healthy boundaries do not become stronger because they are explained repeatedly. They become stronger because they are enforced consistently. A boundary is not merely a sentence you speak, it is a commitment you keep. Many people make the mistake of believing that if someone disagrees with their boundary, they must continue explaining it until the other person approves. But the purpose of a boundary is not to gain permission. The purpose is to define what you will and will not allow in your life. Imagine placing a fence around your home. You do not invite every passerby to debate why the fence exists. You do not remove sections of it because someone complains that they dislike it. The fence remains because it protects something valuable. In the same way, your emotional boundaries exist to protect your peace, your dignity, your purpose, and your well-being. Their value is not determined by whether everyone agrees with them. Their value is determined by what they preserve. Many people fear that establishing boundaries without endless explanations will make them appear rude or unkind. They have spent years trying to avoid disappointing others. They believe kindness requires unlimited availability and constant accommodation. But kindness and compliance are not the same thing. You can be respectful without surrendering your convictions. You can be compassionate without abandoning your values. You can be gracious while still saying, no, this is not acceptable. One reason endless explanations become so exhausting is that manipulative people often move the conversation from one issue to another. You explain one decision and they question your motives. You answer that concern and they bring up something unrelated from the past. You clarify again and suddenly the discussion shifts in another direction. The conversation never reaches resolution because its purpose was never genuine understanding. Its purpose was to keep you engaged, uncertain, and emotionally occupied. Wisdom recognizes when explanation has become unnecessary. There comes a point when your actions communicate more clearly than your words ever could. Quiet consistency often carries greater authority than endless persuasion. A person who calmly maintains healthy boundaries over time sends a powerful message. My decisions are guided by principle, not by pressure. That kind of confidence cannot be argued away because it is rooted in character rather than emotion. It is also important to remember that emotionally healthy people usually respect clear communication, even if they initially disagree with it. They may ask sincere questions because they desire understanding, but once they recognize your decision, they adjust accordingly. Unhealthy individuals often respond differently. They resist, criticize, guilt trip, or attempt to negotiate every limit because those limits reduce their ability to control the relationship. Their resistance is not always evidence that your boundary is wrong. Sometimes it is evidence that your boundary is necessary. Another reason quiet confidence is so powerful is because it protects your emotional energy. Every lengthy debate requires time, focus, and mental effort. If you spend your days defending every personal decision, you will eventually become emotionally drained. Your attention will be consumed by proving yourself instead of improving yourself. Your purpose will gradually become secondary to managing someone else's reactions. This is not how a meaningful life is built. A person with quiet confidence understands that their identity is not dependent upon universal agreement. They know that every worthwhile decision will disappoint someone. Every meaningful purpose requires saying no to distractions. Every healthy boundary will inconvenience those who benefited from its absence. Therefore, they stop measuring the quality of their decisions by the reactions of others. Instead, they ask a more important question. Does this decision align with my values and protect what matters most? Silence often becomes the companion of confidence because confidence does not constantly seek validation. It does not need to announce itself loudly or defend itself endlessly. It simply continues walking in the direction of wisdom. Like a deep river that flows steadily without making unnecessary noise, genuine confidence possesses quiet strength. It is calm because it is secure. It is patient because it is grounded. It is consistent because it is built upon principles rather than changing emotions. There will always be people who misunderstand your intentions. Some will accuse you of changing simply because you stopped tolerating what once exhausted you. Others may label you selfish because you finally chose to value your own peace. Do not allow these reactions to shake your convictions. Growth often changes relationships because healthier choices expose unhealthy expectations. The discomfort others experience when you establish boundaries does not automatically mean you have done something wrong. Your responsibility is not to convince everyone that your boundaries are reasonable. Your responsibility is to live with integrity. Speak respectfully when explanation is appropriate, but recognize when additional words no longer serve a meaningful purpose. There are moments when the wisest response is quiet consistency rather than endless debate. Remember that your life is one of your greatest responsibilities. Your peace deserves protection. Your purpose deserves your attention. Your emotional well-being deserves wise stewardship. You cannot fulfill your highest calling if all your strength is consumed explaining yourself to people determined to misunderstand you. Let your decisions reflect your values. Let your character speak through your actions. Let your consistency become your testimony. In the end, the strongest boundaries are not the ones defended with the most words. They are the ones upheld with unwavering wisdom. Quiet confidence does not seek permission to protect what is valuable. It simply recognizes that a life guided by truth, discipline, and self-respect will always speak louder than endless explanations ever could. One of the greatest traps a person can fall into is believing that every argument must be won. Many people spend years trying to prove their innocence, defend their reputation, and convince others that they are right. They believe that if they can just find the perfect words, present enough evidence, or explain themselves clearly enough, the conflict will finally end. But life teaches a different lesson. Not every argument exists to discover the truth. Some arguments exist only to consume your time, drain your energy, and distract you from your purpose. This is why protecting your peace is often far more valuable than winning another debate. There is a profound difference between being right and living wisely. You can win an argument and still lose your peace. You can prove your point and still spend the rest of the day emotionally exhausted. You can have the final word and still carry frustration in your heart for weeks afterward. Wisdom asks a question that pride often ignores. What did this victory actually cost you? If winning every disagreement requires sacrificing your emotional well-being, your focus, and your joy, then perhaps it was never a victory at all. Many people underestimate the value of peace because peace is quiet. It does not attract attention the way conflict does. It does not announce itself loudly or demand recognition. Yet peace is one of the greatest foundations of a meaningful life. It allows clear thinking. It strengthens healthy relationships. It improves decision-making. It gives you the emotional stability necessary to pursue your goals with consistency. Without peace, even great opportunities become difficult to enjoy because your mind remains occupied by unresolved emotional battles. One reason manipulative individuals often create unnecessary conflict is because conflict shifts your attention away from your own growth. Instead of building your future, you become busy defending your past. Instead of developing your gifts, you spend your energy responding to accusations. Instead of enjoying meaningful relationships, you find yourself constantly managing emotional tension. Little by little, your priorities change. Your purpose begins revolving around surviving someone else's behavior rather than fulfilling your own calling. Think about how much of your life can be consumed by one unresolved argument. Long after the conversation has ended, your mind continues replaying every sentence. You imagine better responses. You wonder what the other person meant. You question whether you should have remained silent or spoken differently. Hours pass. Sometimes days pass. During that time, your body may be present in your daily responsibilities, but your thoughts remain imprisoned by a conversation that no longer deserves your attention. This is why emotional discipline is so important. Peace is not something that simply happens to you. It is something you intentionally protect. Every day you choose whether certain people, conversations, and situations deserve access to your emotional life. Not every criticism deserves your concern. Not every insult deserves your response. Not every misunderstanding deserves your explanation. Wisdom carefully evaluates where emotional energy should be invested because it recognizes that attention is one of life's greatest resources. There is also an important lesson about identity. People who constantly feel compelled to win every argument often connect their self-worth to other people's opinions. If someone disagrees with them, they feel personally threatened. If someone criticizes them, they believe their value has somehow decreased. But mature confidence understands that your worth does not fluctuate according to someone else's approval. Your character remains valuable even when it is misunderstood. Your integrity remains intact even when others question your motives. One of the greatest freedoms you will ever experience is realizing that you do not need everyone to agree with you in order to live with confidence. There will always be individuals who choose misunderstanding over truth, criticism over encouragement, or conflict over peace. If your happiness depends upon changing every one of those people, your happiness will always remain outside your control. But when your confidence is rooted in your values instead of public opinion, you become emotionally steady regardless of changing circumstances. Choosing peace also requires humility. Pride often whispers, "You cannot let them think they have won." Wisdom quietly responds, "My purpose is too valuable to be delayed by another pointless argument." Pride seeks to protect the ego. Wisdom seeks to protect the future. Every unnecessary conflict steals time that could have been invested in learning, creating, serving, building, or strengthening meaningful relationships. Wise people recognize that the opportunity cost of constant conflict is simply too great. Silence often becomes the guardian of peace because silence prevents emotional fires from spreading. Just as a fire eventually dies without additional fuel, many unnecessary conflicts lose momentum when they are no longer fed by endless reactions. This does not mean avoiding important conversations or refusing accountability. It means refusing to participate in arguments whose only outcome is deeper frustration. Mature individuals understand that there is a difference between resolving problems and feeding conflict. Imagine an archer preparing to hit a distant target. Every distraction, every unnecessary movement, every interruption weakens the accuracy of the shot. Life works much the same way. Purpose requires focus. Focus requires peace. When your emotional energy is constantly scattered across endless conflicts, your ability to pursue meaningful goals becomes weaker. Protecting your peace is therefore not merely about feeling better. It is about becoming more effective in every area of life. As you grow in wisdom, you begin measuring success differently. Instead of asking, "Did I prove my point?" you ask, "Did I protect my peace?" Instead of asking, "Did I have the last word?" you ask, "Did my response reflect my values?" Instead of asking, "Did they finally admit I was right?" you ask, "Did this situation help me become a wiser, stronger, and more disciplined person?" These questions transform your perspective because they shift your attention away from controlling others and toward mastering yourself. Never underestimate the strength of a peaceful heart. Peace is not weakness, it is controlled strength. It is the ability to remain calm while others create chaos. It is the courage to walk away from unnecessary battles without feeling defeated. It is the confidence to let your character speak louder than endless arguments. It is the wisdom to recognize that your greatest victories will rarely be found in proving someone else wrong. They will be found in becoming the kind of person whose life is so deeply rooted in truth, discipline, integrity, and purpose that conflict no longer has the power to steal your joy. Remember this truth. Every moment you spend protecting your peace is an investment in your future. Your dreams need your attention. Your family needs your presence. Your purpose needs your energy. Do not surrender these priceless gifts to battles that produce nothing except exhaustion. Choose peace. Choose wisdom. Choose the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your life is too valuable to be governed by endless arguments. When you do, you will discover that the greatest victory is not having the last word. It is having the freedom to move forward with your peace still intact. There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize that their greatest resource is not money, talent, intelligence, or even opportunity. Their greatest resource is their attention. Whatever consistently receives your attention eventually begins shaping your character, your emotions, your decisions, and ultimately your future. This is why emotional freedom is one of the greatest gifts you can ever give yourself. The moment you stop allowing unhealthy relationships to dominate your thoughts, you create space for something far greater to grow, your purpose. Many people do not realize how much of their lives have been consumed by emotional distraction. They wake up thinking about yesterday's argument. They replay conversations during their commute. They imagine future conflicts while trying to fall asleep. Even when they are physically present with family, friends, or coworkers, their minds remain occupied by someone else's behavior. Days become weeks, weeks become months, and before long, years have passed. During all that time, life continued moving forward, but they remained emotionally standing still because their focus was trapped in a battle that never truly ended. Purpose cannot flourish in an environment of constant emotional chaos. Just as a seed struggles to grow in rocky, neglected soil, your dreams struggle to develop when your mind is overwhelmed by confusion, resentment, and endless conflict. Every great achievement requires concentrated attention. Every meaningful relationship requires emotional presence. Every significant goal demands consistent effort. These things become difficult when your energy is continually being drained by situations that produce no lasting growth. One of the most powerful decisions you can make is choosing where your attention belongs. This may seem like a simple decision, but it quietly determines the direction of your life. Attention is like sunlight. Whatever it consistently shines upon begins to grow. If your attention is focused on bitterness, bitterness grows. If your attention remains fixed on fear, fear becomes stronger. If your thoughts continually revolve around disappointment, disappointment begins shaping your identity. But if your attention is directed toward learning, discipline, gratitude, wisdom, and purpose, those qualities gradually become the foundation of your life. Silence often becomes a doorway to this transformation because silence removes unnecessary noise. It creates room for reflection. It allows you to hear thoughts that constant conflict had buried beneath emotional exhaustion. In quiet moments, you begin asking questions that truly matter. Who am I becoming? What kind of life am I building? What legacy do I want to leave? These questions redirect your focus from surviving unhealthy relationships to intentionally creating a meaningful future. Purpose has a remarkable ability to protect your emotional health because it gives your life direction. A person with clear purpose does not become easily distracted by every criticism or every misunderstanding. They recognize that their time is limited and too valuable to waste on endless emotional battles. This does not mean they stop caring about people. It means they stop allowing unnecessary drama to become the center of their existence. Their mission becomes greater than their distractions. Imagine an architect constructing a magnificent building. Every day requires careful planning, steady effort, and disciplined attention. If the architect abandoned the project every time someone criticized the design, the building would never be completed. The same principle applies to your life. Your future is being built one decision at a time. Every day you choose whether to continue laying the foundation of your purpose or whether to leave the construction site because someone else's negativity captured your attention. Those daily choices determine whether your dreams remain ideas or become reality. Silence also gives you the opportunity to rediscover your identity. Many people lose themselves while trying to manage someone else's emotions. They become so focused on avoiding conflict that they forget what brings them joy. They stop pursuing their passions. They postpone their goals. They silence their own voice because they have become accustomed to living according to someone else's expectations. But when emotional noise fades, your authentic self begins to emerge again. You remember your gifts. You reconnect with your values. You rediscover the vision that once inspired you before fear and manipulation clouded your perspective. Another beautiful result of living with purpose is that your relationships begin to change. As your standards grow stronger, you naturally become drawn toward people who encourage growth rather than dependency. You begin appreciating relationships built upon mutual respect instead of emotional control. You recognize the difference between those who celebrate your progress and those who feel threatened by it. Purpose acts like a filter. It gradually removes distractions while drawing healthier influences into your life. There is also a profound connection between purpose and peace. People often search for peace by trying to eliminate every difficulty from life. But lasting peace comes from knowing why you are living. Challenges become easier to endure when they are connected to meaningful goals. Temporary disappointments lose much of their power when your eyes remain fixed on a greater vision. Purpose provides perspective, and perspective protects peace. Every day offers an opportunity to make small investments in the life you desire. Read something that strengthens your mind. Develop a skill that prepares you for your future. Spend time with people who inspire integrity and wisdom. Care for your physical health so your body can support your calling. Practice gratitude so your heart remains focused on what is good instead of what is missing. These daily habits may appear insignificant at first, but over time, they become the quiet architects of extraordinary lives. Never believe that silence means your life has become empty. Sometimes silence is simply creating room for something greater. It is clearing away emotional clutter so purpose can take root. It is teaching you that your value is not measured by how many arguments you win, but by the life you faithfully build. Every moment you choose growth over resentment, discipline over distraction, and purpose over emotional chaos, you move one step closer to becoming the person you were created to be. Remember this final truth. The greatest revenge against manipulation is not making someone regret losing you. The greatest victory is becoming so deeply rooted in purpose that your happiness no longer depends on their approval, their attention, or their opinion. When your identity is anchored in wisdom, your character is strengthened by discipline, and your vision is guided by purpose, you become truly free. Your silence is no longer empty. It becomes the fertile ground where confidence grows, peace flourishes, and the future you were meant to live begins to unfold. From that place of quiet strength, you stop merely surviving difficult relationships and start building a life defined by meaning, integrity, and lasting fulfillment.